Hello, and welcome to today's Bridges to Community show. My name is Sarah Turcott, and I work at Bridges by Epic at Westford.
And my name's Erica Lab, Executive Director of Bridges by Epic in Westford. Today's guest is attorney Shani Collymore. Shani specializes in elder law and estate planning. And we are so excited to have Shani here today to help us navigate future planning with all of you, our viewers. So welcome, Shani. Great to have you.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, we're so thrilled you were able to join us today.
Likewise.
You know, we're thrilled to have you because we're really here to talk about an important topic that many people don't seem to want to bring up or talk about with their family. And I think it would be just great to start off by maybe explaining to our viewers, you know, what is elder law?
So elder law is the area of law focusing on issues that affect the aging population. That can commonly be estate planning, elder abuse, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, but most commonly people think of it as long-term care planning issues. I think those are probably the most common things that come up for people in elder law.
Sure, sure. And, everyone, I think, starts this planning at, different stages within their life, or maybe, something comes up that, has them start turning to you folks. But can you just make a recommendation to our audience? How old should someone be to start exploring this?
So for long-term care planning, I think people, if you're in your mid-60s, you should start thinking about long-term care planning, but definitely you should have some type of estate plan already in place. I recommend that from when you're 18 that you at least need to have a power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, basic things in place.
Wow, from age 18. Oh my gosh. Okay. So what are the basic things that all of us, assuming we're all over 18 watching, I don't think we have a big toddler viewership, but
hopefully not.
So what are, give us the basics of what all of us should have in place right now, just minimum.
Minimum. Everybody should have a durable power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, and a HIPAA authorization. Especially seniors, a durable power of attorney deals with who is going to take care of your finances if you're ever unable to. So that could be because of dementia-related issues that you can't handle your own finances, but it could be because you're suddenly in a car accident and something happens, even if it's temporarily, that you need assistance with your finances. So that document nominates the person that is going to do that.
And do you need a lawyer to fill that out?
Yes.
You need an attorney?
You do need an attorney. And it's not automatically your spouse. If you're married, people always think that, oh, well, I'm married, my spouse can just do everything automatically. It's not automatic. So everybody should have that. And then I say from 18 because a lot of times kids are in high school, they go to college, and parents are still they're in that mom-child mindset that they can still make decisions for their child, but now that they're 18, they can't. So if the child still wants parents to be able to help them in their new adulthood, they need those documents too.
Okay.
So interesting.
Yeah.
And then same with the healthcare proxy.
Yeah, healthcare proxy is nominating somebody to make medical decisions for you when you're incapacitated, and that can be a temporary incapacity, because you're having surgery and maybe you're under anesthesia. That's an incapacity that is temporary, but you're still incapacitated. So say it could be something minor even, like you're having knee surgery and they need to ask, there's a complication or something. So as soon as the patient regains capacity, the person nominated in the healthcare proxy document no longer has any power, which is the opposite of the power of attorney for financial stuff. Once you sign your power of attorney, you've given your person authority right from when you sign your power of attorney document.
Okay. Sure. And can you just explain to the audience the importance, what could happen if they don't have these documents in place?
Yeah, scare tactic.
Scare tactic. So the most, I guess, worst case scenario, if you are a married couple and something happens to one of you and you don't have a power of attorney in place, worst case scenario, the spouse would have to seek a guardianship or conservatorship over their loved one, and that is a court process.
Which is inconvenient.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah, it can be inconvenient, it can be costly and it can take up time. So you can, if there's an emergency, you can request that the court, expedite the process, but it's not a quick process. So you still have to go into the court and get permission to then gain access to your spouse's finances, whatever the asset is that you might not be a joint owner on.
Okay.
All these things that you don't want to do if you're in a situation that's urgent. And,
right.
Yeah.
And the same thing applies for healthcare proxy documents. Technically, if you don't have a healthcare proxy in place, the hospital could force you, the loved one, to go and get a guardianship over the person if there's some sort of dispute about who is the person that has the decision-making authority. It's not always the spouse, or sometimes there's a second marriage situation, and what if the kids and the new wife disagree about what to do with dad? So that's where these healthcare proxy documents can be really important.
One thing we find in working with so many families in the assisted living and memory care environment is that when you do these things, it's like a gift you give to your family.
Yeah.
So these papers and these forms, and then additional ones that we might get into later, lay out what you want. And you're able to have these conversations around your wishes prior to needing them, which is such a great gift to give your family, because they know what you want. And as much as people don't want to talk about it, it doesn't make death come quicker.
No.
So just do it.
So true.
And and if you're the person that has to make the decision for a loved one about, whether they want a feeding tube, life support, or that they don't, or it's such a hard thing anyway, when you're thinking about these things for a loved one. But at least I feel like it makes it a little bit easier if you've had these conversations with the person about what they want. Some people feel strongly that they don't want, extraordinary measures if they're dying. They don't want to be on a feeding tube. They don't want machines keeping them alive. And other people do. They really do. And if you have never spoken with your mom or dad about what they want, it makes it so much harder to then pull the plug, stop feeding tube if you don't know, if they haven't said, yes, this is what I want to do.
Absolutely.
So you're really doing a kindness for your kids that they know that this is your wishes.
Sure. Well, that actually leads up to another great question is, what types of long-term care planning should seniors be thinking about, and, what does that process look like for them?
So my favorite long-term planning tool for married couples is the testamentary trust. And I'm sure that most people probably haven't heard about, they don't know what a testamentary trust is. I feel like it's not a well-known planning tool, but it's, I feel, one of the better planning tools.
Okay.
So everybody knows what their last will and testament is, correct? That's, the document that you sign saying who you want to get your property, right? So a testamentary trust is a trust that's built into your last will and testament. So instead of being an external document, it's a part of your will. Okay. So if you are a married couple and you leave assets to your spouse in a testamentary trust, instead of owning them all jointly, so like a lot of couples will have joint bank accounts, they own the house, everything's joint, and it's automatic and fast. Instead of doing that, if you separate your assets, and your will would say, I leave everything to my spouse, but in trust. And because of those little words, there's a trustee that would manage the inheritance for the surviving spouse, and all of the assets in that testamentary trust are protected for the surviving spouse. So years pass by, the surviving spouse needs to go to a nursing home, they don't have money, they can apply for Medicaid to qualify, to help them pay for the nursing home care, and the assets in the testamentary trust won't count as part of the surviving spouse's assets.
Interesting.
But if spouse that had predeceased had left everything to their loved one, their spouse outright, it would totally, fully be countable.
What is the look back on that? Is there a look back?
So there's no look back on testamentary trusts
Okay.
because your spouse has to die.
In order?
In order to set up the trust, the person has to have died. So there's no look back.
Okay.
I think it's a bigger sacrifice that the person has passed away.
Right, right,
so
right.
there's no look back on that. It's
Okay.
effective immediately upon death. You do have to go through probate, but the probate rules in Massachusetts were streamlined back in 2012. We redid all of our probate rules, and it's a lot more of an easier process than it used to be. So going through probate really isn't a big deal, and I know a lot of people feel, oh, I want to avoid probate, but if you have no reason to go through probate, yes, we can avoid it, but I think it's a small cost to pay to get this kind of protection over your assets.
And that's only for married couples?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Wow.
So besides the testamentary trust, what other types of, long-term planning would you recommend, if that, married couple situation doesn't apply, what are some other plans people could look into? So
the most common thing that, when I meet with people, they say, they want to protect their home. That's like a very common statement that I get from people.
Sure, they've worked long and hard
that's
for that.
Right. Your home is your castle. It is the thing that people really strive for. I feel like, especially in America, that's yours. You've made it if you have a home. But a lot of times people don't know what they're trying to protect their home from. Exactly. They just know that they want to protect it. They want to make sure that their kids have the home. It's available to them to live in or sell, or that's the one thing they really want to save. So the most common thing that people are trying to protect their home from is estate recovery. What's that?
Yeah.
So people that are in a nursing home that can't afford to pay for it privately, which is most people, because average cost of nursing home right now is like $400 a day or more, depending on your area and the nursing home that you go to. I mean, that really adds up, and even if you have some savings, it's going to be gone very fast paying for the nursing home care, and then then what happens for your spouse. So most people can't afford it. So they apply for Medicaid. Medicaid is not, you haven't paid into it. It's a public benefit program. And in Massachusetts, it's run by Mass Health. It's totally different than Medicare. Medicare is health insurance for seniors 65 and older. Everybody pays into it when they're working. That's Medicare. They have very similar names, so I think it can be very confusing.
And that covers things like a rehab stay, a short-term rehabilitation stay in a nursing home. Medicare covers that.
Right.
Your benefit covers it, and off you go.
Right, you have your 100 days.
So we're talking about a long-term need
care
for
stay.
care.
Exactly.
Correct.
So that's Medicaid, which is run by Mass Health. So if you end up qualifying, if you apply for Medicaid for your nursing home care, and you get accepted, when you pass away, Mass Health has something called estate recovery. That is how they try to recoup some of their funds that they paid to the nursing home on your behalf. So say if you were in a nursing home for a number of years, say they paid $300,000 to the nursing home. They're keeping track of that, and they have a tally of every single penny that they paid to the nursing home for you. So how they can get reimbursed is through your estate when you die. The only asset a person on Medicaid would have in their estate would be a house. So they can file a claim against your probate estate with the court, and then the house would have to be sold to pay the lien back.
It's like a retroactive payment.
Yeah,
right.
And then if there was anything left, that would go to your kids or whatever.
Okay.
So that estate recovery, that's the main thing people are trying to protect their house from. There are a few different ways that you can go about trying to avoid this happening. I think the best way, if you can afford it, is if you purchase long-term care insurance. Long-term care insurance, you would do that when you're still in relatively good health, you know, 60s. You do that through an insurance agent. You're going to have to go through a physical and all of that. And you pay an annual premium. Your premium is based on how much of a daily benefit rate you purchase from the insurance company. So daily benefit meaning like $200 a day to the nursing home or in-home care, what have you.
Or assisted living.
Assisted living, that's right. Or someplace fabulous like Bridges. So Medicaid says if you purchase a qualifying long-term care insurance policy that meets their regulations, then they promise they won't pursue estate recovery against your house when you die. How do you get a qualifying long-term care insurance policy? Well, you have to at least purchase coverage that's $125 a day minimum that'll cover for at least 2 years. And the elimination period, which is the period you have to wait before the insurance company will pay you, has to be less than a year. So if you buy a policy that meets those qualifications and you go from your home straight to a nursing home with no stops in between, they will say they'll let you basically keep your house. The only downside to that is your family has to be paying, you know, you're paying the maintenance costs on the house while you're in the nursing home, but they've agreed they won't pursue estate recovery against the home. That's one really easy way to protect your house. Second thing, and that really would apply if there's one person, not a married couple. If you're married and you own your house jointly, what we're going to do is use that power of attorney we created, and we're going to transfer the house from this being jointly owned to the healthy spouse name. So say husband's going to a nursing home or assisted living, what have you, we would transfer the house to be solely in the name of the person that wasn't going to be on Medicaid, so the healthy spouse.
That makes sense. Okay.
The reason for that is because you're allowed to make transfers between a husband and wife, and there's no look-back period. The look-back period is for gifts outside of the husband and wife or couple that you have. So a husband passes away, there's no estate recovery on the house that's in the wife's name because the wife is allowed to have the house. So when the husband passes away, he only has his less than $2,000 bank account that he's allowed to have, and there's nothing to recover. So for a traditional couple, the couple that's married, there's not going to be an issue. It's really once there's one of you left that then you really have to think about these issues like the long-term care insurance. That's when you're really going to be down to it. Because if there's two of you, you can always transfer it to the healthy one.
Yep.
The next issue that you're going to try to do you have a son or daughter that can live with the parent and help take care of them? So there's another exception for Medicaid called caretaker child exception. So if one of your kids, not a grandkid, it has to be a son or a daughter, they actually move in with you, and that's your legal address is your parents' house. And they take care of mom or dad for at least 2 years, and then you can get a note from the doctor that says, but for the care that you provided your parent, they would have been in a nursing home sooner. Then Medicaid says, okay, because you did that for 2 years, mom or dad can transfer the house to the child before, and we would do that before we applied for Medicaid, right before. Okay. So that's one, and you do that obviously, you know, when there's one parent left. Yep. Yes, that's another option. Another thing you can do is if you have a disabled child, you could transfer property to a disabled child. You're always allowed to do that, or to a trust for a disabled child. You're allowed to transfer assets, and that doesn't disqualify you from Medicaid. Okay. So if you have a child that has some type of special needs. If none of those things have come, are working for you, because not everybody can purchase long-term care insurance. It's expensive, or maybe you have health issues that, prohibit you from qualifying. The last thing we're going to do is an irrevocable trust. Okay. And you do that with an elder law attorney like myself or another office. And that is where the look back comes in. There's a 5-year look back on any gifts you make for Medicaid. So what we're essentially doing with an irrevocable trust is we are giving assets away, like your house. It could also be cash assets. We're giving them away to your children now, but instead of giving them to your child outright, we're doing it in a trust. And we do that for several reasons. Your kid can get divorced. Your kid can have, money problems, debt, all sorts of things, that can happen to people. So we want the money to be protected. And, what if we don't make it through 5 years? So if we give it to the kid now and then 3 years later, dad gets sick, we need to be able to get the money back, right? To get out of whatever planning we did. So putting it in the trust protects it, that we know it's always going to be there. It's not going to be spent. There's no creditors that have taken it. So mom and dad can't be the trustee of the irrevocable trust. Okay. They can't be a beneficiary. Basically, mom and dad have no rights to the trust at all. They've essentially given it away to their kids. It's just in a trust to protect the money.
So you got to trust your kids.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Right, and that's a good. If your client doesn't have a good family dynamic, that might not be a good planning option for them. Right. So you really have to talk to your clients and figure out
and make sure that you can trust the kids you give it to will be fair with the siblings too.
Well, that's why with the trust, the trustee has to do what the terms of the trust say. Okay. So it's not always going to be a kid trustee. If it's a kid, we usually have we'll have at least 2 kid trustees, but a lot of times we encourage clients to pick an independent person, like an attorney or somebody they know that is good with the money, that maybe they have a niece that's an attorney or financial advisor or something like that. An independent type person is always best. Okay. So that way there's not like any issues between the kids.
So once you hit that 5-year mark, if the parent, the mom or dad or whoever it is, has to get care, they're safe from that look back, and then that's out of the equation for whether or not they get assistance. Okay.
Right. So once you hit once it's been funded for 5 years, then the assets in the irrevocable trust are protected. And the reason why I say that's kind of like more of a last ditch option is only because the parent has to give their assets away and they don't have access to them. With the testamentary trust option, it's in a trust, but the trust is for the sole benefit of the surviving spouse. Right. So even though it's in trust, it's all for the benefit of the spouse, and it can be used on them.
So that's ideal if it meets your personal needs, right?
So the testamentary trust is ideal, but obviously that's not going to work out for everyone. If your spouse doesn't pass away, if the first spouse that dies doesn't pass away without needing nursing home care, then you're not going to be able to do the testamentary trust option. So that's why we have these other options that we kind of have to play on. And that is why we have the gift trust, the irrevocable trust, as sort of like a plan B type option.
Oh my gosh, I feel so much smarter.
It needs to be individualized. Everyone's family dynamic and situation is so different.
And it's great. You can work with an individual family and really get at what their personal needs are and what their situation is.
The plans really are customized for the family, because family dynamics and what people want to accomplish. Some people, they would rather spend their money down going to assisted living, and that's totally great. Assisted living facilities are usually better than nursing home facilities, usually do get better care care.
More
if you have the
home-like,
right,
at
yeah,
least.
it's more home-like. It's a little
less
bit better. It's a
expensive.
little less
Yeah.
expensive
Right.
than a nursing home. But you know, for some people, they're not able to stay there. Maybe they get to a certain point and they can't stay there, or they don't have the assets.
Medically complex, yeah.
Yeah, so it's very customized into what the goals of the client are and what the whole family dynamic is.
Sure. Well, this is really great information. And Shani, before we wrap up today's show, is there anything else you want to share with the audience, whether it be, you know, things to look out for,
Yeah, the
or
pitfalls,
the pitfalls, and or just, you know, the importance of not waiting too long?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd say common pitfalls are, you know, waiting too long to do planning. You know, mom's 95 and she needs to go to the nursing home next week. And, you know, I mean, especially if there's no spouse that we can transfer assets to, that's a really hard, you know, that's really hard. There's some last minute planning options, but most of them are going to still result in the assets getting paid at some point back to Medicaid. If you don't have a caretaker child, if you don't have a disabled child,
Yeah.
What's going to generally happen is most of the assets are going to get paid to Mass Health, whether it's now or after the person's passed away. There's limited things we can do at the last minute. There's not nothing, but
Right.
it's just...
And also, I just want to say, because I hear these ads all the time, don't let the nursing home steal your house. Nursing homes provide great care in a lot of cases, and you're paying for a service.
Yeah.
It's not like theft. You know,
and they don't,
they're not stealing
they're
it,
not
right?
stealing your
You're
house.
paying for the service.
So a lot of, and you know, it's really important if you have a loved one that is going to a nursing home, that you, even if you can't afford to hire an attorney to do the whole process for you, go in and get a consultation. You know, we have paid consultations, but you know, it's $350 for 2 hours. Even if you can't afford to hire us to help you with the Medicaid application, now you know your rights, you know what you're allowed to do. A lot of times people will go into the nursing home and they have their financial office that tells them what to do, but they're not attorneys, and they're, you know, they don't always give them the correct advice, and not necessarily from a bad place, but they just don't know.
Right.
So one thing that I would encourage people to do is seek advice of an elder law attorney when you're considering a nursing home, assisted living, anything. Talk to somebody and figure out what your rights are, because you don't have to transfer your house to qualify for Medicaid. You might want to do some transfers in order to avoid estate recovery, but you're allowed to keep your home and have $2,000 and qualify for Medicaid. And so the ads that are geared to scare people, and so, you know, there's some truth to them, but it's not giving people the full picture, and it makes people feel panicked.
Right. So don't panic. We've got you. Shani's got you.
Exactly. I was going to say, to, you know, schedule an appointment or to learn more about these planning options, you know, feel free to reach out to Shani Ray at Madgen Johnson right here in Westford. That's all we have time for today, but thank you so much for being on our show
Yes, it was
and
great.
educating our audience. And until the next time.